Alright, everybody. So this new unit we're going to be studying is we're going to look at three different areas of history. The first will be the Renaissance, which we'll start with today, then the Reformation, and then the Age of Exploration. So our world history kind of becomes a Western civ class to a point. We'll look at some European issues and kind of how Europe influences the rest of the world in terms of the histories and all those kind of things that take place in terms of the world that way. And so my speakers turn on here for some odd reason. Let's start with what the Renaissance actually was, kind of first big thing we're looking at here. So what the heck is the Renaissance? We talk about the Middle Ages ending around 1500, 1400, give or take, all depends where you are in Europe. But in Italy, we see a change happen. Around 1350 or so, a change happens here in Italy where they call it a return to learning. In fact, the Renaissance was not a term used back then. A guy in the 1800s developed, Jacob Burckhardt, developed the idea of Renaissance. He said, well, there was a Renaissance that happened because we returned to learning. Basically, instead of going backwards, as some people said they were doing during the quote unquote dark ages or the Middle Ages, it was a return to advanced learning. Now, obviously, some people argue against this, and some of you guys did in your essays as well. But that's kind of why it's called the Renaissance. It's supposed to be a return to learning. The other thing is that it was secular, as we talked about in class. A lot of the Middle Ages was dominated by religion. Rulers ruled by religion. People's lives were dictated by religion, and so this was actually more secular. Secular means not religious. A lot of times these guys would kind of think outside of religion, think about other things besides religion, trying to prove things without religion. But in the end, religion was still always right. But it was an issue that way. That's besides the point. The other thing is that they were optimistic. This means that basically the people that the learned people this time thought that people were good. People had ability. In the Middle Ages, the idea was more or less that people were bad people. If you did something wrong, you were a bad person. Here, all people had the ability, the uh, they're inherently good. That they had the ability to do good, but didn't always use that ability. A lot of times they had the ability to do good. So that's what Renaissance really kind of comes into, is return to learning. Now, where did it happen? It starts in Italy, like I said, around 1350. So here's Italy. But Italy here does not look like modern day Italy. Back then, Italy was a collection of states, of princedoms, of those kind of like little city states, basically built around certain cities. So we have like Genoa, Savoy, Milan, Venice, Florence, the Papal States built around Rome, where the Pope was. Down here is Naples, Sicily, Sardinia, so on and so forth. Um, and the idea of the Renaissance is that through this time, things became increasingly urban. A lot more people moved from the countryside to the cities, which could be because of plague, because of whatever. They end up making the plague worse, but a lot of times came down to trade as why people moved to cities so much. But here we see the Renaissance really take place in these cities, especially Venice up here, Milan over here, and right here in the middle of Italy, Florence is one of the big leaders of this area. Now, trade also leads to these cities being the leader of the Renaissance. Notice, especially Florence here and Venice, their city-state is right in the water. They had lots and lots of trade. For Milan up here, a lot of times they would run trade routes this way through the mountains, the Alps. And so these city-states had a lot of money. Their leaders had a lot of money, and they could take time, learn. The richer guys knew how to learn, how to pay money, that kind of stuff, pay for artwork, and that's where we kind of see why the Renaissance happens here in these cities. It really comes down to who control these cities as well. Cities were either typically led by princes, so a duke, a prince, not necessarily a king, but kind of like a prince or a duke or a count. Someone have a high-ranking noble guy who was a ruler. So one example would be in Florence, uh, Cosimo de' Medici. The Medici family kind of ruled Florence. They were huge rulers of this time period because of their status. There might be oligarchs of merchants and nobles as well. The Sforzas were in Milan, and they were big banking families. They had made lots and lots of money through banking. They held banks that actually would give loans to traders and merchants. They made lots of money that way. Basically, we understand that these rulers and the nobles and upper class were maybe less than 10% of the population. And so this is a very, very small group of people that were involved in ruling these different cities. and also probably also a very small group of people that were involved in the Renaissance itself. So it wasn't everybody; it was just a small group of people. And to be honest, these still live in little city states. They pop back up here. Those city states fought all kinds of wars against each other as well. Now, obviously, if you're a little small city state here, you're not going to have a lot of people living in your city to hold an army. So a lot of times these guys hired mercenaries. Mercenaries were hired armies, like hired guns that they would bring in to fight their wars for them. And so they fought lots and lots of wars between each other, trying to control land, control money, control trade, all those kind of things. Now, one of the ideas we talk about is the idea of a Renaissance man. We heard about Leonardo da Vinci in my example presentation was being kind of the ideal Renaissance man because he did a lot of things. A guy named Baldassare Castiglione wrote a book called The Courtier. The Courtier was about how to live, be one of these upstanding, rich, noble kind of people. And he said you have to be educated and good at many things, not just of you. You can't just specialize in fighting or woodworking or being a blacksmith or being a farmer. You had to know how to do lots and lots of things. And so, if you were a nobleman at this time, you had to be able to fight and you had to be able to dance with the ladies at parties, those kind of things. You had to be able to read Latin. You had to be able to ride a horse. You had to be able to play an instrument. All these different kind of things. It'd be like today, and we see some students here at school that are like this, where you may be an athlete playing football, track, whatever, and also you might be in the musical, you might be in show choir, you might be in forensics or FFA. You're kind of very well rounded in terms of what you all do. You're not just a jock. You're not just a theater person. You're not just an FFA person. You may participate in more than one activity. It's kind of what the Renaissance idea would be. Now, the big question came down how to rule, and one guy here, this guy right here, Niccolo Machiavelli, was one of the guys who really decided how kings should rule. And his book called The Prince would be inspiring to leaders, still today. Basically, he said as part of the secular idea, you have to get rid of ruling by Christian principles. You can't always use the Bible or the Christian church as a way to say how you should rule. And that basically meant that you have to do what you have to do. If you want to rule your state, your country, whatever, you have to sometimes break the rules to make sure you get what you can get. His famous line is the ends justify the means. And you can break the rules, if you will. You can kind of go around what the rules are supposed to be if you want to get what you want to get. And so that's kind of that idea of Machiavelli. He had two big ideas here. It's like whether a leader should be loved or be feared. And love would be giving stuff to your people, giving them bonuses, giving them tax breaks, those kind of things. Feared might be, well, if you cross me, we execute people. And so he had lots of rules. Like, for example, when it came to executions and punishments, he said, don't punish everybody. Pick one or two people and make them an example. That way, people they're going to fear you, but they're not going to hate you. And so he kind of said you have to walk this line between fear and hate. He also talked about being like a lion or like a fox in terms of you have to be very strong and violent and vicious sometimes. You also have to be very cunning sometimes. And we're going to have more about this on our presentations as well. Most of the people living at this time, though, were the poor, the working class. You can see the picture here. Life seems like a lot of very, very hard work, even for the cat and dog over here, I guess. That he does not look happy. Anyway, a lot of times, 85, 90% of the population was poor. The heads of the city were the rich, the bankers, the merchants, the nobles, those kind of people. Instead, the poor, they were farming, they ran shops, they only had barely enough just to get by and survive. Is all they really had. I'm going to pause this for a second. And we're back. Sorry, guys. Somebody was at the door for me, so sorry about that. Besides, the poor, in terms of kind of how they really lived, and most people were poor, the family was still very, very important. This time, still use arranged marriages, like we talked about in India. Marriages back then were not about love; they were about power, politics, and a chance to get ahead. These rich, powerful families would arrange their marriages so that two families would get together so that they could make a bigger country or make more money or kind of increase the chance for their family to make more money in the end. And kind of unite kingdoms, or unite princedoms, unite states. So it was all about politics, about power, about chance to get ahead. Even in the poor class, they'd arrange their marriages. So you might have two shopkeepers have their kids marry, and they then own a monopoly on the shops in that city, wherever it might be. Dowry was a big part of it too. The wife's family had to pay against the husband for the marriage, and so you still had these guys who would use as much money as they could to kind of marry their daughter off, almost like in a way sell their daughter into marriage in a way, as a way to um, advance their family's power. Now marriage is a lot different back then. Besides being a non-love marriage, women married very, very young. In the rich noble class, the rich class, sometimes girls were young as 12, 13, 14 years old and they're getting married. So most of the ladies in our class would be getting married already. The guys might be 23, 24, 25, 26 years old. They're probably thinking, you gross, whatever. That's just the way it was. I mean, it wasn't right. In the poor class, but a little later on, maybe you might be getting married at 16, 17 for ladies, that kind of deal. Um, Basically, the father had absolute authority, though. All decisions, money, who got married, all that kind of thing, all went through the father. The wife ran the house. I don't have hours there, but they ran the house. Really had no real power, though, in terms of the family. To a slide here about the idea of humanism. And this guy here kind of embodies the idea of humanism, humanism in Europe, in Italy at this time. Basically, humanism was a study of the old classics, the Greek and Roman texts, the Greek and Roman writers. And so if you were a humanist, you read and studied the Greek and Roman texts that maybe hadn't been studied for the previous 1,000 years in some cases. You had to learn how to write, how to use grammar. You had to be able to speak and write in Latin. You had to learn about morals, about how things should be. You study history. It kind of took more of a reasoned point of view to things, kind of looking through kind of why things happen the way they are, and talk a lot about kind of how a person should be, why a person should be educated, why a person should study these old Greek texts, these Greek writers and Roman writers, and kind of learn the old philosophers. And so the Petrarch, this guy right here, was really the first humanist. You kind of see how he kind of fits in this role. He's got his book here, which is in terms of kind of writing and reading. He was a poet. He has the laurel wreath around his head, kind of you see back in Rome, the old Roman emperors. And you kind of see this idea of being a learned man. Being a learned man was mostly secular. You kind of studied by yourself to learn how to be a better person, but you do it in a secular way. And sometimes even question the church a little bit in some cases, but always saying kind of that they're right in the end. Question is, why would you study? Why would you take the time to study and learn all these things? And in the end, it was all about civic humanism. Civic meaning for the city. These guys would become learned people so they could make a difference in their community, in their state. And so these learned guys would then go work for the Pope, who ran the Papal States and the Catholic Church. They may go work for the Prince. They may go work for the Republic or the city-state. Basic education meant you had a good job, you had influence, you had power, and you were using that education to help people out, make things better for people, make the country a better place to live in. Things that you see is that this is only happening in the rich class. You didn't see a lot of the poor people studying, learning Latin, all those kind of things, and learning how to read that, all that. You wouldn't see that take place for a long period forward. But if education kind of expands to richer class, became a big deal in the Renaissance period. And that's where we're going to leave off for now, guys. We're going to cover this in class. We'll have one more lecture looking at the art and writing of the Renaissance, Renaissance 2. Please make sure this is done and complete. I look at my calendar here. Done and complete for next Monday. That's going to be the 17th of February. That's my calendar, sorry. Make sure it's all ready for that time, all right? Thank you for watching, guys. Have this ready for class on Monday the 17th. Thank you very much.